This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
This episode is brought to you by Guidance Residential, whose fall refinance special is finally here. Not only can you unlock a lower rate to save thousands of dollars over the course of your contract to own your home sooner, you can also receive $500 towards your appraisal fee. Visit Guidance Residential on Facebook or at Guidance Residential on Instagram today. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. How are you? I feel like I got to see a double bonus of you this week.
I know. It's just because it's holiday crunch time, and so we're trying to,
free up our holiday
front
schedule.
load all of our stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and free up the schedule. So tell me about your week.
My week was normal with all my crazy kids. Got to start seeing basketball, which is the highlight of my, it's a highlight of my winter. And, I have to say, I'm really looking forward to slowing down for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. A little bummed that I don't get to, because of basketball, don't get to go and see family or do anything fun. So, we're doing our typical Thanksgiving at a restaurant and get dressed up. Somebody else cooks. I don't have to clean. And then we go for a hike in the morning. And it's just a lovely, lovely weekend. So I am very much looking forward to that. But what about you? What are you going to be up to?
So this week, the highlight of my week, I have to say, I've had several, alhamdulillah.
Good. That's a bonus.
What's really important, like you're always talking about self-care and your sanctuary is that beautiful space that you've created that you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do your yoga and your meditation, your Quran and everything. So, your room really needs to be a place of peace and calming. And my room always reflects the state of my brain. So it's always scattered and I never can find anything. It's disgusting and dirty. The designer came yesterday and did it all.
Yeah, isn't that the best?
Oh,
remember I told you offload some of that,
beautiful.
and then you come in and you're like, oh my God, it's such a great space.
Yeah. And you know what I learned? The most important thing I learned from her is when there's crap lying around, put it in a basket.
Yes.
You cannot go wrong by putting it in a basket.
And the reality is, if you don't use it in 6 months, you can also get rid of it. That is a huge thing. So
you can come Marie Kondo my house.
Yeah. So don't put things in a basket if they can be donated.
If you're not going to use it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of another thing that people can do. And honestly, when your space is clear, like right now my bed is unmade, so it's making me feel a little bit crazy. But my cat is lying in there right now, and I don't want to disturb him.
She can't disturb her, of course.
So I will make up my bed afterwards. But, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about Umrah. Are you guys thinking about it? Because I know we're thinking about a plan before my son goes to college.
Yeah. So with that, when we were looking it up, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is not letting anybody under the age of 12 into the holy sites. So that would be 50% of my kids couldn't go in. Yeah. And I believe you have the same situation, right?
Yes.
So Omar was like,
even if they're vaccinated?
Not. Even if they're vaccinated, they don't care. But I believe in the next 6 months, inshallah, that will change.
Okay.
Because, my little guy is like, I want to go see the Kaaba. I never got to see it. And I was like, no, baby, technically you were there. You were just in my belly. And he's like, that didn't count. I didn't get to see it. I didn't get to touch it. So, and he's only 6 years old, Habibi. So I want to be able to do it. But we'll wait. We'll make dua that the KSA will open it up eventually. But they said absolutely nobody under the age of 12 for now.
Well, we're planning to go in April. So my hope is they'll be open at that point because my son wants to go before he goes to college.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What a beautiful send-off.
It is. I was like, well, that can be our fun vacation together for spring break, our last one. And hopefully by then, all the schools he's gotten into. So inshallah, let's pray that Umrah opens up. And I definitely appreciate you giving me that insight because I'm not going to waste my time planning that. But do you want to talk a little bit about what our soapbox for today is? Because I'm a little bit nervous about that.
Yeah, and I've already said that I am scared to death about Thanksgiving because after every major holiday, every calendar holiday, we see a spike in cases. But currently, we already have 23 of our 50 states showing at least a 5% increase in COVID cases. And they're not that new strain. They're just the regular old Delta, which we were scared about last year, right? So 5 states or 23 states have had about a 5% increase. Our ICU beds, we're starting to see the numbers going up even locally. We're seeing that. Colorado, interestingly enough, is super critical right now. They're hitting like red alert situation. Other states that are hitting that red alert are Michigan, Illinois, Minnesota, and Vermont.
That's weird.
Rando with Vermont. But maybe because it's so tiny.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really sure why that is, but more than 1 million kids have been vaccinated, but that's over the age of 12. So we are hoping that 5 to 11, these little guys who are getting it in school and bringing it back home, once they're vaccinated, hopefully, this is going to go, the numbers will go down. However, I think we're just not going to be there in time for this holiday. So if you are going to be gathering, make sure it's with a bunch of vaccinated people. If you have anybody who's incompletely vaccinated, just have them mask up so that they're not hurting anybody else. Nobody intends to give anyone COVID. Like I just saw a patient the other day and it turned out his relative who hadn't even been there in a week had passed COVID on to him, we think. So then I have to get tested, and it's just like, it's annoying and unnecessary, and I'm okay because I'm vaccinated and I'm boosted now, so I'm safe, but I could have still carried it on to other people, including my family, my incompletely vaccinated family. So this is going to be really important. Do your due diligence during Thanksgiving. I love that you're going to a restaurant, and I hope that you either eat indoors or that they space you out.
Well, we eat
it's
outside.
going to be outside. Beautiful. So you can wear your fur coats and your minks and everything and look fancy.
Because we are pro animal in my house, so we are not doing that.
Your daughter's gonna throw paint on all of it.
She's my vegan sitting here like, what are we talking about? No.
Yeah. Absolutely. So y'all just do your due diligence and let's make sure that this holiday doesn't end in tragedy like it did last year. So please, I am asking you, all of your healthcare friends are asking you to do us a favor and don't get us busy this holiday season with COVID.
I definitely appreciate that. So thank you so much for that. But like I said, we are getting vaccinated because we want this to end as quickly as possible because quite frankly, I'm enjoying wearing lipstick again. So let's get...
Not just Fridays for our
Not
recordings.
just Fridays. I'm like, I'm starting to wear lipstick again, people, because come on, let's get this mess. It's very important. But guess what, everybody? We are so excited today. We're going to be offering a bonus episode during our Latina Muslimah series this November. With us today is Monica Traverzo. She's the co-host of Salam Girl podcast. She's another mom of 4. This is just what we do here. Seriously, this is our thing.
We only invite moms of 4. That's like a rule.
That's just a thing. And but guess what? She's an avid runner. We are not. So this is going to be a first for that. She runs with a purpose and on purpose, and not because the zombies are chasing after her. So good for her. We are so glad that Salam Girls exists because it's essentially a podcast that talks about supporting converts. And as we know, it's a very lonely space for a lot of them. So we appreciate their voice in the marketplace. And I want to say Monica herself is Puerto Rican, born and raised in Texas with Uzma, and all great things come out of Texas, apparently, though I say Chicago. And we are welcoming Monica today. Thank you so much for being here. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I feel so honored to be here. I'm so happy to join you girls and chat about all the things.
We are Monica. So Thanks excited.
We usually kick off by asking our guests their momming story and a little bit about their momming philosophy. Anything that you're open to sharing.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah. I became a mom about 11 years ago when I got pregnant with my oldest of 4. Just like, I love that we're this club of
12 kids between us. 12. 12 kids on this. How did that happen?
Super women, I tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, I was so anxious and worried throughout my whole pregnancy, and it actually festered even more when she was born. I was happy she was born and that she was safe and healthy, but my first day as a mom, honestly, I was a mess. I was in the hospital that day, and I remember my entire family came to visit us. I mean, my entire, like when I say entire family, I mean all my in-laws and all of my family that live down here.
When you've got an ice pack
So,
between your legs and you haven't slept all night, that's great. Come on over.
yes, and I look at that now. I look back at it now, and I understand that it was like super supportive and loving, but in the moment, I just felt I felt overwhelmed and stressed, to be honest. But I know that it came from a place of love, of course.
Yeah.
And that comes from that Arab culture and that Latino culture, that supportiveness. And so I very much appreciate it. But I was overwhelmed and I was very stressed, and there was all these thoughts entering my head, like, how was I going to raise this kid? Was I going to do a good job? Like, I was so nervous. But now we can fast forward 3 kids more, 11 years later, and I can speak a little bit more confidently about what my momming philosophy is, And really that's just to raise my kids to be confident in their identity, and that their identity is unique to them, I always struggled with that, especially as a convert Latina American Muslim. I always thought these questions like, am I Muslim enough? Am I Puerto Rican enough? Like, who am I? What am I doing? So I think for me, I just really want to raise my kids to have that confidence in their identity. And really, I feel like it's a 2-part process. Yes. The first part being about like where they come from, like their background story, like where does mommy come from? Where does daddy come from? What are my roots? What's my culture? And I think the second part is to really differentiate my parenting style to each of my kids. I think that means like, even though all 4 of my kids are raised in the same household, they have the same parents, the same relatives, they're really all unique in their own way. I can't parent them each the same.
Right.
So I got this one kid who's crippled by her need for perfectionism, and in the same way, she's super outgoing and she's very outspoken and loves to perform. But then you got this other kid who's actually really shy, but she's very creative and artistic. They're different.
Right.
So I guess for me, my parenting philosophy comes with that. Yes, my kids need to be treated equally, but I'm not going to really treat them the same, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, my love language will be different per each child. My conversations with each of my kids looks a little bit differently. Even the way I discipline them will look a little bit different because they are, really unique in their own way. So
I love that.
I absolutely love that, because that is what I tell a lot of my clients. That is the key to parenting, is understanding your kids' individual needs and trying to address them. And there's no one-stop shop. Like with Uzma, she's a doctor. Like, you're not going to treat all your patients the same. Everybody needs something a little bit different. So I love that you do that, and you're already, girl, ahead of the game if you're just doing that. So give yourself props for that.
I don't think I learned that until like 3 years ago.
I know.
Well, I don't think it comes easy to anybody. It's just... it's just what you have to do. Essentially, I mean, not essentially, eventually, you really just have to do it. And then it kind of like clicks, like, oh, my kids are
very different.
They got
They're
unique
people.
needs. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. When they're babies, it's like much easier, right? Like little infants. It's like, okay, you feed them, they take a nap, it's like the same. But then as they really develop into their personalities, that's when it really kicks in, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all of our kids, I feel like, are ages where they are declaring themselves like, here I am, this is what I am, now you figure it out, mom. So we just kind of have to do that. So you talked a little bit about the Arab and Latino influences in your children's life and in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal family background, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, totally. So building that confidence totally comes with really building confidence in who they are and their culture. And so, as I mentioned, I think that really teaching our kids where they come from is important. So my husband and I are really all about representing each of our cultures. We've taken memorable trips to Palestine. So my husband's Palestinian. He's a Palestinian Arab American. So we've gone there. And just this past summer, we spent a month in Puerto Rico where my kids got to enjoy the beach and time with some of my family. We got to stay with my mom. And so we really tried to let them experience like each place. So there's that. And there's also, you'll see just even in our home, like displayed in our decor, you'll see like the Palestinian map, and then you'll see like a Puerto Rican flag, and then you'll see right, like even just like on the kitchen counter you have we have these, like, it's like a za'atar and oil container, and it's like they're labeled in Arabic for that type of specific, like, it's like a breakfasty food that we use when we have like our Arab breakfast. But then right next to that little container you have like a little painting of the flamboyant tree, which is like the Puerto Rican tree. It's hand painted by a local Puerto Rican artist, and they're like sitting right next to each other on the counter, so you can see like both of those representations just like in the kitchen. Even though I'm not the best cook, we try to do foods from, you know, the Arab culture, the Puerto Rican culture, the snacks, all those things we have on hand, we try to really bring out and showcase with our kids. But, you know, sometimes it does seem like me and my husband are like a competition, trying to like, I want to represent my side, he wants to represent his side. But I think at the end of the day, you know, we always end up playing fair and try to represent both sides. So I remember this one time my son had a culture day at school where you had to like dress in the representation, like represent your culture.
How did you fuse that? Like, I'm trying to figure out how did you fuse that?
I mean, yeah, so we put like a little beach shirt on him that had like the Puerto Rican beach on it with a keffiyeh around his shoulders.
Oh, I love that.
So we like mixed it up, you know, and that's what we try to do. I mean, you know, it's not about whose culture is better or bigger at the end of the day. It's just about representing both and showing our kids, like, be proud of both your Palestinian and your Puerto Rican sides. So
I love that. And I'd love to taste some, you know, Puerto Rican, Arab, like Palestinian fusion food. Because, I mean,
what a great idea.
That would be so amazing. And my stomach is growling just thinking about it.
It's Portestinian.
Portestinian.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
how do you guys say it?
We say PaliRico.
PaliRico. I love the PaliRico. Well, speaking of PaliRico, like, and I love that you should actually coin that phrase, trademark it, put it on a t-shirt. But, you know, like part of, you know, Puerto Ricans, as we know, and we've learned from some of our past guests this month, they're very family oriented, we're very religious in their Catholicism and all of that. So how did they react when all of a sudden their daughter's like, I'm going to become Muslim and I'm going to start covering my hair and I'm going to start? How did that go down? And what was that like for you all?
So yeah, my family was very devout Catholic. My dad went to Catholic school until he was about in 8th grade. So I think just when we moved to Texas, I do feel like my family was still very rooted in their Catholicism, but it was more of like an agnostic approach. Like God was always very important, but like I don't think I really went to Catholic church very often growing up. So it wasn't like a huge part of my life. It was more, it was harder to find, I do feel like, here in Texas. You have more of like the Baptist Christian churches and things like that. And so I was very involved in that when I was hitting like my puberty ages. I was going to the churches all the time because it was just attractive to me to live a God-conscious lifestyle. But, you know, fast forward when I started college and exploring more faiths and religions, I did come across Islam. And when I converted, my parents, I don't think it bothered them too much, because a little backstory would be that entering into college, I kind of became your typical college girl in a sense. I think I can leave that there, and you kind of can get an idea of what your typical American college lifestyle looks like.
Girl,
and
do
when
it.
I'm gonna leave that there.
Leave it there.
But then whenever I started learning about Islam, I really started reining that back and really putting out forward better grades, more time with my family, and my character started changing to, it was more positive, really. I was less more about myself and more about like my family and about, you know, just leading a good lifestyle. And so I think they were pretty, you know, I I'm really blessed that they were really good with it in the beginning. Not to say it didn't come without any challenges at all, but I mean, for the most part, especially if I were to compare with most stories that I do hear about kids getting like kicked out and like not talking to each other anymore, I didn't experience any of that. So I do feel very blessed because they saw the good in Islam. And I think it didn't come until I started wearing hijab that they felt like I was becoming more extreme. I do want to say that they probably thought it was a phase, because I do think that in college that was something that was typical from me, was to go through different phases. And so when I chose to become Muslim, they're like, oh, it's just a phase. And they were cool with it because, like I said, of the characteristic traits that were coming out. But then when the hijab came on, they're like, oh, maybe this isn't a phase. Maybe she is very serious, you know? And so they were really taken aback by things like that. And I don't think they ever wanted to say that they were embarrassed or worried for me, but I definitely could feel that vibe just being out with them, or, you know, them just knowing that their daughter is not only changing internally in her characteristic traits, but now it's like this external thing that is making them worried for me. But I kept pushing on, and I wanted them to know that I still was who I am. I am still the same Monica they raised, and that just because I'm having this outer reflection of who I'm trying to be on the inside, that doesn't mean necessarily that I'm not your daughter and that I'm not the same person I've always been. And so it really took a lot of effort, I mean, on my part to show that to them without being too pushy. So I would never really talk about Islam or the teachings. I just tried to show that through character instead of, like, you know, really preachy, in a preachy way.
I love that. I love that. And I'm so glad that eventually they came around. I'm interested in finding out about, you know, the Muslim community, because I feel like there probably weren't a lot of resources back when you converted for Latina Muslimas, and what was their response to you, and, you know, what are some of the dumb things that they said or did that made you feel like, possibly made you feel, and I apologize in advance if it ever happened, but made you feel like, oh, maybe I made a mistake?
You know, I do feel like it's hard to make me feel like offended, if you will. I mean, don't get me wrong, when, you know, I get critical feedback, I'll probably cry, but in terms, I cry for everything, though.
Oh, good, you're on the right podcast then.
If I'm mad, if I'm sad, even if I'm really happy, I'm just a crier. But I don't think I took too much offense to it, because I've been on the other, I've been on the other end of the ignorance of not knowing what Islam is at all. And so I feel like, because I had that, like, that perception of what that looks like, it was very forgivable for me to be like, okay, you just don't understand, or this is different for you. In terms of, like, the Muslim community specifically, I really tried to avoid it by, I think I tried to avoid it more than face it. So, for example, if I would go to the masjid, I noticed if I would tell them my name, I'm Monica, you know, they would immediately be like, Monica, like, that's different. Like, where are you from? And then all 20 questions just following that, you know? And so I started, like, I could pass for an Arab a lot of times. And so I would just say, my name's Mona. So,
oh, no.
So it was like a complete avoidance. It was
yes, because you didn't want to get into it.
I didn't want to get into it. And I think now it's like, okay, we if I'm in the mood, if I'm feeling comfortable to talk about the stories or, like, the feelings or whatever it is that they want to ask, if I'm feeling comfortable, then I will say, my name is Monica, you know, I'm Puerto Rican, and then we go from there. But if I'm not in the mood, I'm Mona. That's my name. But you know, if I do go that other route, I think one of the things that is probably, if anything annoys me, it would be that they're so surprised that I chose Islam. They're so surprised that I'm Puerto Rican and I chose Islam. And I think for me, somebody who loves it so much and is just happy to be here as a Muslim, it's like, why are you surprised?
Yes.
Don't you feel confident in your faith enough to be
Yes.
like, oh yeah, of course you're Muslim. Like, that makes sense because you find it so beautiful as well.
Yes.
So I think if anything, that was like the biggest thing for me, is like the shock of a convert exists. It's like, yes, we're here and we're happy to be here. And that should not be surprising to you, because you should love Islam just as much, and not it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like how
absolutely.
it should just be like more of this feeling of
Like a confirmation
sure,
of your faith. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And I honestly think from the convert revert experience is because you're learning about Islam minus the cultural baggage that we as born Muslims happen to carry, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
and you're learning Islam from that inquisitive perspective and understanding versus it just being handed to you because you were born there. So I do feel, I mean, honestly, and Uzma and I talk about this a lot. Like when I'm teaching my kids about Islam or I'm teaching it to them from that perspective. Like, how do we
Yes.
learn? This is why we're doing these things. It's not just this is what it is. It's halal, haram, like let it go. But explaining to them the beauty behind it, I think that will go a long way in cultivating that sense of Islamic identity within our family. So I love that you shared that within here today. But I have a quick question for you as far as like, and what's something that we've been asking all of our guests. It's one of the fastest growing religions in the Latino community, and we're asking each guest, why do you think that is?
Sure. I do want to point out, earlier you said that, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call from my mom. I'm like, she doesn't call me in the middle of the day usually, so I'm wondering what that's about. You mentioned that it's important for your kids to fall in love with Islam, and I think that, and not so much worry about the haram and halal aspects. And I think as moms, we especially need to focus on that, because the rules can come later. Isn't that how Allah taught us
That's how
anyways?
Allah
If
taught
you
us.
think about it, if you think about the way that Allah revealed the Quran, He never threw down the rules at us first and then said,
No.
just do it.
Yeah.
It was, here's the mercy
reasoning.
of Islam.
Yeah.
Here's the compassion we have. And when we approach Islam that way with our own children, the rules will be easier to
follow.
come by, to follow.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like, oh, well, I love Allah, so I want to please Him. So of course I'm not going to eat pork, or of
Right.
course, let's wake up early for Fajr, even though it's so difficult. Like,
Yeah.
I'll do that for Allah because I love Him.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was such a great point. I really feel like that's something to highlight on. But as far as Latinas being the fastest growing population, absolutely. I've heard that statistic also, and it absolutely does not surprise me. I feel like Islam has this sense of family that Latinos really admire, because Islam teaches us about having these healthy, nurturing family life environments that love and kindness and the mercy and compassion are all part of Islam, and that's also part of Hispanic culture.
Yes.
And so when I see that, that's why that statistic doesn't surprise me, is because of the family aspect. I really think that's the main thing. Of course, there's other reasons, I'm sure, but I feel like that's one of the main ones. Yeah. I know even just between me and my husband, we kind of banter about like language in terms of like, there's a fine line between culture and religion, of course.
Right.
But if we do want to talk about like the majority Muslim cultures and Latin culture, me and my husband even kind of joke around about like how our language is even similar. Like there's so many Spanish words that are similar to like Arabic words.
Yeah.
So, but that's more of like a cultural aspect. I think religiously, I think that family value is the biggest thing.
Yes.
Yeah. We can't disagree with you, A, because we're not Latino, and B, because, we see it in the Latino community the way they are, and how a family gathering, it's normal to have 50 people, and that's a family gathering. That's how we roll. We're like, you're only having 7 people at Thanksgiving? How does that work? So
I know. I think this week we're having to do like 2 Thanksgivings because there's just so many people.
Yeah, exactly. Understandably so. So I want to say 2 things. One, touching back to Monica, just your name. Like, I don't know. I know that for you, it's a coping mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. So going by Mona sometimes works for you. To me, it feels like you're having to suppress who you are because we're stupid.
Sure.
You know, and it's like, if somebody says their name is Sally or Bob and they're in the masjid, salam alaikum, they're Muslim. Yeah, first we do think a little bit because here on the podcast, we've talked a lot about FBI surveillance. And so, yeah, definitely keep that in the back of your mind. But you don't need to get into, oh, when did you come to Islam? Or were you born Muslim? Or where are you from? And I know we like to ask and get like a genealogy and a rectal exam together the first time we meet somebody because we're Muslim, but it's not necessary. You can stop at their name and just hang out, get to know them, and let somebody tell you. Because again, we live in America, and America is such a diverse place, not just for all people, it's specifically for Muslims. You're not going to find anywhere else in the world this kind of diverse Muslim population. And for that reason, I think our approach has to be different with each other even, and we have to give ourselves grace and not make somebody hide her identity or not reveal all of her identity because she just doesn't want to get into it at that moment. Maybe she's just here to pray Jama'ah and she needs to leave and go back to work. Leave her alone, so I would leave that as one piece of advice. And then going back to monoliths, there's definitely not a monolith in America. There's not one look to an American. There's not one look to a Muslim, just like there's not one look to a Jew or a Christian, right? So what do you think that we as Muslim Americans can do for non-Muslims, for our neighbors, to dispel this myth of Islam as a monolith? It's all practiced the same, looks the same, people are the same, it's all or none kind of situation. And as a Latina, how do you think you can contribute toward that?
Sure. So back on your first part about the whole name, that was amazing advice. And I definitely, if you needed to hear that again, you need to rewind and re-listen because we absolutely should not be suppressing our identity for others. I think for me, I'm literally a professional over-explainer. So
join the club.
So when people are like, why is your name Monica? You're like, oh, in the third century, my family, and this is what it is. Yeah. So you're like, in the interest of time, I'm just like, let's not talk about this right now.
Exactly. I think now I've learned after developing confidence over time. I think that in the beginning state, I would say within the first year or two of my conversion, I was just so nervous. And I think now if people were asking me my name, I'm comfortable enough to be like, my name is Monica. And if they ask me questions, I'd be like, yeah, I just love Islam. I love this. Well, that's it. Leave it there. Yeah. I'm just bada bing, bada boom, done. But I do think that I have tendency to way over explain because I'm a overthinker as well. And so I think that it's all about just kind of balancing and figuring out when is the right time and right place for those types of conversations. And so great advice there. Remind me that second part again, because I got into it.
Helping non-Muslims understand that Islam is not a monolith, especially in America.
Oh, okay.
And as a Latina, how you help do that.
I think revamping to the whole confidence in yourself and what your identity looks like. I think it comes from that. I try to really be my authentic self no matter who I'm around. I'm respectful of who I'm around, of course. I'm not going to completely... I'm obviously going to act a little bit differently in front of little kids as I would maybe a group of my friends. It's a little, there's a different vibe going on, but I think it is all about being authentic to who you are, deep in the roots. So, let's just use our appearance as an example. I remember when I first converted to Islam, in terms of embracing hijab, I really felt like I had to wear super baggy dark colors and I wasn't allowed to be I had to look a certain way. It took me a really long time to say, at the end of the day, Latino culture is all about being colorful and bright, and I'm not happy this way. Why can't I still adhere to the guidelines of Islam in terms of modesty? And I'm sure, surely we all have things to work on. I'm sure I do. But I still needed to embrace that part of me that loves color and that loves, ruffles or, and accessories, all the things. I just feel like when we feel more confident in who we are internally and externally, that we can portray that to the non-Muslims, and they're just like, oh, this girl is totally happy being exactly who she is, whether that be a Mexican American Muslim, whether that be Puerto Rican, whether that be an Irish American Muslim, whatever that looks like. That displays like in conversation, and that comes out in your everything, in the way you carry yourself, in your appearance, and the way you talk. So I think it's all about like just finding that within yourself.
Yeah. So we just need to basically be ourselves, is what you're saying, and be confident in who we
Yes.
are to dispel the myth of the monolith.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's great. And I think you've talked about how you roll out the identities for your kids. That brings us to language, because you did touch on that briefly.
Yeah.
Did you ever try speaking the 2 different languages to the kids so that they could pick them up and learn them?
Sure. So back to like where my husband being Arab American, it's there's so many words that are very similar, and so we always talk about how, like, for example, shirt, like in Spanish it's camiseta, and in Arabic it's camis, so it sounds very similar. Rice is arroz and ros. Like they're so similar in terms of language, and so it's funny because depending on like if I'm talking to, like, my name is pronounced Monica, like in Spanish language, and my husband's is Khalid. But it's funny because like we call each other a little bit differently, just kind of depending on who we're around. So if like we're around my family, it's like Khalid, like there's like a Spanish flair
funny.
to it,
That's
you know?
funny.
and then with his family, there's like an Arab flair to it. And so we do with our kids. I do. They have like English is our primary language. Let me put that out there first. English is our primary language because that's where me and my husband can both communicate, because obviously he can't speak Spanish and I can't speak Arabic. He's a fluent Arabic speaker. So he's born and raised speaking Arabic, and I am conversant in Spanish. So I'm not completely fluent, but I'm very good. Like if you drop me in a Spanish-speaking country, I will survive. But if you want to talk like politics or religion, I'm lost because that's too specific for me. So anyways, that's just a little bit of backstory about our languages. And we do teach our kids like little phrases here and there of how to say little common phrases in Spanish or in Arabic. But our kids do take Arabic classes. And the reasoning for that is not for a cultural purpose. The reasoning for that is because it's the language of the Quran. Yeah. It's not because we favor daddy's language or anything like that. It's because Islam is the core of where our family values come from, and Arabic is the language of the Quran. And for that reason, you're going to learn Arabic. You're going to learn to read and write Arabic. So they're actually in Arabic class right now. So they're doing like, they have like a little tutoring that they do. So I guess, for that reason, they do learn a little bit more Arabic, if you will. Because it's, the language of the Quran. And with our kids, even their names, we try to pick names for our kids that are both easy to say in both languages. Right. Yeah. I'm not going to pick like a strong Arabic name. Like, let me just give you an example. My son, I have one boy, his name is Omar. Omar is a Spanish name. Yes. There's like rappers out there that like rap in like they're Spanish, famous. And that's culturally a very strong Spanish name, Omar, and it's very strong in Arabic culture, Omar. It's a little bit different pronunciation by a slight variation, but yeah, we just try to pick names that work for both. Yes. Yeah. So, and that's with all of our kids.
And you want it, because meaning for us, I always tell people, like, I call them what's the word that I use? Like my kids' names are easy to pronounce in any language, and they don't lose its meaning depending on how you pronounce it. That was a big thing for me. So like my daughter, we got stuck with the Z name because when I found out I was having my one daughter, I was convinced. I love the name Kira. I was like, I love it. We were calling her Kira. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Then one day I happened to mention to my father-in-law, and he was like, oh, everyone's going to call her Kira. And that means bug. And why are you going to do that? And so
Or
when
Kita and cucumber.
or cucumber, exactly. And
my
so
goodness.
they said that, and because my mom's family is of Irish descent, so I was like, oh, that's a beautiful Irish name, but it can kind of sound ethnic. I love it. And then when as soon as my father-in-law said that, it was like, that's all I heard. And then I was like, oh, that really stinks. And I don't want people to call it like, why did your mom name you Bugs? So that's for me, like it became a big thing that no matter how somebody pronounce, because half my family is, from the West Virginia, and I'm like, I didn't want them to say it and then the meaning changes. So like that was something so convertible names, that's what I call them.
Exactly. I love it. Yeah.
Convertible names. So they can go both and the meanings don't change. So like my oldest is Zachariah. So like that's kind of depending on who it is, they change the pronunciation for it, and we're fine with that, So I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that's a consideration that Muslim Americans, whether you're a convert or not, have to consider that people in Muslim majority countries don't have to think about. And, I hope that they appreciate that. Some of our biggest critics are coming from Muslim majority countries, and it's like, you've not lived here. You don't understand our lived experience. So for you to judge us based on our convertible names or whatever else we do to live our Islamic identities as best we can and as fiercely as we can, your criticism of that is just so unbased. And until you walk in our shoes, much like we can't tell you that, oh, this is not hard or this is easy for you because you live in a Muslim majority country. Just because the adhan is playing doesn't mean that it's easy for you to attend prayers, for instance. So
perfect example.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we've gotten so much out of you, and like we're like pulling this insight just because you're I always say the convert experience is something that we really need to focus on. But we have a section where we essentially do this rapid fire. And so Uzma's going to she's going to set a timer, and I'm going to ask you all these questions, and you're going to have to answer them right away. So don't get nervous.
Okay.
Because
I feel like I'm on a game show.
It's actually,
it's kind of like a game show.
It is like a game show. So, okay. Are you ready? Uzma, do we have
90 seconds.
Ready?
Oh gosh.
First thing that pops in your mind.
Set. Okay, the first question we always ask is, what book are you reading right now, or have you just read?
Okay, I can't even remember the name, but I really did just read a book.
That's crazy. Moms are like, wow, I read. I do. You know what? And I used to read a lot, but now I'm like taking see, I'm an over-explainer. I'm already taking way longer to answer this than is necessary. The book that's about...
The problem is y'all made me so nervous before we started that now I can't even like process what the last book I just read was.
Okay, we can move to the next one. Maybe
we'll come back. Okay.
I just returned it to the library last week, and I can't even remember the name.
What is the one thing about you?
Mom brain is real. Okay.
Mom brain is real, and we'll talk about that. But what is the one thing about you that you feel, other than the obvious, that surprises people about you?
I can wake surf. That's one of the cool things about me lately.
Yes, it is.
So I think a lot of people are like, oh, but you cover up, and how do you swim, and how are you in the water, and all these things. And it's like, no, I'm a mermaid.
Yes.
Their life.
Exactly. Like, I love that.
To be in the water. And so it took a lot of practice, but I learned how to wake surf, and I've gotten good enough to where I can like actually get up with my kids and sit with me. So, really fun.
I would love to see that. But when you close your eyes, I always coach people to do this. When you close your eyes, what is your happy place?
On the beach.
Yes, I was going to say it would have to be the beach. You're in the water. You're a mermaid in another life. And we didn't touch upon it during the interview, but I did want to ask for all of your people that are fans of Salam Girl, and we did say that you were going to talk about it just a little bit, but are you guys going to do any new episodes? And if so, when can we find you?
Okay, yes, inshallah, that's going to be if Allah wills it, it will happen. Inshallah, it will one day. But as of right now, we are on pause. Honestly, I'm going to blame COVID on this one.
Yes,
because
do it.
Yes, and we can blame COVID on a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, but it's the truth. I mean, the way that we recorded Salam Girl, Nicole and I, was together. And it was while our kids were at school, essentially. And so when COVID happened and we were having to homeschool our kids, it felt nearly impossible to get together and record. So we're homeschooling our kids and COVID's around, and it just felt like forever. And then by the time it was like summer break and things started letting up, it was still just so difficult because life happens.
Yes.
And I started working. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, and so I recently started dipping my toes back out in the workforce. And so
love that.
Just a lot of components here that have a lot of things. We're still good friends. We're still here, but we're just not really recording right
See,
now.
and everyone heard that because the rumor mill goes crazy, and they're like, what's going on with these ladies? And you're gonna be like, it's COVID, there's nothing sorted, nip those rumors in the bud. But maybe you guys can have some special episodes and we can kind of get to hear some of that, because we obviously love you and Nicole and love everything that you guys have been doing. So thank you so much for that explanation.
We appreciate the resource that continues to be there for converts who may need it. So if you still want to listen to Salam Girl podcast, you can go wherever you listen to Momming While Muslim. You can listen to Salam Girl as well. And, I know people are tapping into it. I found it a little bit later too, and I think I've listened to almost every single episode that there is. And
that's so sweet.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
appreciated it, and I'm like, okay, well, I want it back. I'm like I'm not even a convert. It's like, I'd love to have it back. But we're so glad that you came onto our podcast to talk about your Latina Muslimah experience, and we learned so much from you, and we hope that we get to connect in the future or work together. We love it.
Love you.
Oh, I was so happy to be here. Are you kidding me? This was such an honor. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Have a great Sunday,
rest
ladies.
Of your weekend, and
you too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, ladies. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Guidance Residential, whose fall refinance special is finally here. Not only can you unlock a lower rate to save thousands of dollars over the course of your contract to own your home sooner, you can also receive $500 towards your appraisal fee. Visit Guidance Residential on Facebook or at Guidance Residential on Instagram today.